Hello, everyone. On behalf of UN Women, the permanent missions of Afghanistan, Indonesia, Norway, and the UK, the Global Network of Women Peacebuilders, the Afghan Women's Education Center, and the Afghan Youth Ambassadors for Peace organization, a very special welcome to each and every one of you to this side event at CSW on local women and youth peace builders demand to participate in the Afghan peace process. I'm Melanne Verveer, the director of the Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace, and Security, and we're so pleased to have all of you with us today. A note before we begin. There is simultaneous interpretation available for Pashto and Dari. On your computer, go into the little box in the corner, usually says more, and under languages. If you want the interpretation in Pashto, select German channel. If you want the interpretation in Dari, select the French channel. And now let us begin. There could not be a more urgent time to have this discussion and to reiterate the need for a peace process on Afghanistan that is aligned with UN Security Council Resolution 1325, namely one that ensures the full and meaningful participation of Afghan women in the decisions that will affect the future of their country. Afghan women, more than anyone, want to see an end to this war and yearn for a durable peace. They have made the greatest sacrifices over these 4 decades of conflict, and they have been working to build a more secure, prosperous, and self-reliant Afghanistan. Today, over 60% of Afghans are under the age of 25. Despite limited efforts for Afghan women and youth peace builders to participate fully in the peace process, they continue to be mobilized to advocate for a peace that is sustainable and for the full participation of women's rights that are guaranteed by the Afghan Constitution. We know that a durable peace will only be possible if it is achieved through a process that is locally owned, inclusive, and participatory. A process that ensures that the perspectives and experiences of local peace builders and that addresses root causes. An immediate ceasefire is essential. It is critical. In recent months, a brutal campaign of assassinations has targeted civil society leaders and women in government, journalists, Supreme Court members, human rights activists, the best and the brightest of Afghanistan. But a ceasefire must also ensure access to education, improved health care, religious freedom for minorities, support for a vibrant civil society, and gender equality. Today's event is an intergenerational dialogue between Afghan peace builders and national and global policymakers on the urgent actions necessary for the success of the intra-Afghan peace talks. This is meant to be an interactive discussion. So if you would like to make an intervention during the question and answer portion of this event, please use the icon, raise hand, and we will be able to take your intervention. And now let us begin with the opening remarks. The biographies of the speakers will be shared in the chat, so I will not go through them for each one. But let us begin now with Her Excellency Ambassador Adela the permanent mission of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan to the United Nations. It is wonderful to have her with us today. Ambassador Raz, please.
Thank you, Ambassador Verveer. Dear friends and partners, it's a pleasure to start this year's CSW with an event focused on women and youth participation in the Afghan peace process. I am delighted to see such a significant interest in this topic at a very important time for Afghanistan. Before I deliver some very short opening remarks, because I truly would like to hear from all of you, allow me to express my sincere thanks to the global network of women Peacebuilders, whose expertise and dedication made this event a reality. I also would like to express my gratitude to the Afghan Women's Education Center and the Afghan Youth Ambassador for Peace organization. It will be because of organizations like yours that we do have a vibrant and engaged civil society and actors in Afghanistan. Further thanks to our dedicated and international partners, notably Indonesia, Norway, and the United Kingdom. Because of your tireless support and joint efforts with the government of Afghanistan, Afghan women and youth can today hope to pursue their dreams and forcefully and credibly demand to participate in our peace process. And of course, thanks to my dear friend, Ambassador Verveer, for your dedicated work in the cause of Afghan women. Dear colleagues, Afghanistan is not the same country as we were in 2001. We live in a new Afghanistan, a country with a vibrant civil society, strong female leaders, and a dedication to international norms, standards, and best practices. Our youth and women are informed and educated by a free press, the demand to be included in the peace process and to see their interests reflected within the final decision. Afghanistan is a country that seeks, respects, and includes all Afghans' input in all aspects of the decision-making. Our inclusive method of governance extends to our approach to peace as well. That's a demand and that's a commitment by the government of Afghanistan. The new Afghanistan is represented by a groundbreaking negotiating team that includes fantastic and brave Afghan women negotiators that most of you know them. The government of Afghanistan is fully committed to include Afghan women and youth's voices in all aspects of the peace process, and as well in the governance and in the politics of the country. We are working to work with civil society on several initiatives and to make it a reality. We know that unless youth and women, who are the future and majority of Afghanistan, are not included in the process, the final decision, the peace process, will not be sustainable. If our future leaders and change makers are excluded, we will never see peace, we will never see stability, we will never see progress and prosperity. However, the Taliban are actively working against the inclusion. Notably, the Taliban and other terrorist groups have increased their inhuman campaign of senseless violence, especially targeted attacks and killings against civil society members, women, youth, civil servants, and academics. Only a few weeks ago, 3 young Afghan female journalists were brutally murdered. I do seize this opportunity to call on our friends and partners in the international community to condemn and act against this sharp increase in violence. The attacks deliberately targeting women and youth in our aspiration for a modern nation that protects rights and encourages the full, equal, and meaningful participation of women and youth in all aspects of our private and public life. The attack means to dissuade the participation of women and youth in the process, create widespread panic, and as well as squeeze and reduces our aspiration for peace. And that will never happen, because I know the younger generation in Afghanistan, and I know the women of Afghanistan. Nothing will threaten their aspiration and hope for a sustainable future in Afghanistan, a sustainable peace in Afghanistan. So here, once again, colleagues, my very sincere gratitude to all of you for bringing a very important topic today for discussion. We are at a very critical time in Afghanistan, and we do need to hear the voice of women. We do need to hear the voice of youth, because these are the two majorities. And unfortunately, in a lot of time, They are excluded and they are taught upon being the minorities, and they are not. It's important that any decision made in Afghanistan includes their voice, their thinking, their demands, their desire, because any agreement, any decision being made, it will be brought back to Afghanistan and it must be implemented. And its implementation will highly depend if it is accepted by the vast majority of the Afghan society, and the vast majority is made by women and youth. I thank you all today, and I'm very grateful to be part of this conversation. And I'm really keen to hear your recommendation, your suggestions, your advice. And I think it is a very critical time that we unify our voices together and we demand what is needed for our future. And that demand is definitely taken into a serious consideration by the government of Afghanistan. But it is important that on the other side of the table, meaning Taliban, must listen to our voices as well. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Raz, and thank you for your indefatigable leadership, particularly at this critical moment for your country. We are very grateful to you. We turn now to Ambassador Mona Jewel. Her Excellency is the permanent representative of Norway to the United Nations, and Norway has been a great friend of Afghanistan and for women in peace and security. Ambassador Jewel, please.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Verveer, and thanks to all the organizers for this very, very timely discussion. As Ambassador Raz already has underscored so convincingly, the participation of women and youth in the peace process is critical to achieve a sustainable peace in Afghanistan and to build a future where the developments of the past 20 years are sustained. Maintaining and strengthening women's rights, access to education, and fundamental freedoms are key to achieve a strong and stable Afghanistan. However, as we all know, since the beginning of the intra-Afghan peace negotiation last September, we have seen a concerning development in a number of attacks targeting youth and women. Attacks deliberately targeting education facilities and individuals who participate in civil society, killing, injuring, and threatening the voices of those who want to influence the future of Afghanistan. As co-penholders on Afghanistan in the Security Council, together with Estonia, we have highlighted this issue by facilitating a press statement from a United Council last week condemning these attacks and emphasizing the centrality of an inclusive peace process in reaching a political settlement. We have also had the opportunity to discuss the Afghan peace talks with some of the women negotiators in the Afghan team, strong Afghan leaders who play an important role in advancing equal opportunities for women. A key takeaway from this conversation was that much work remained to create the necessary space for women at all levels in Afghan's peace process. And with more than 60% of the population being below the age of 25, sustainable peace in Afghanistan is particularly dependent on the voices of young being heard. I would like to highlight 4 brief points where I think we could and should see more action. First, identifying women and youth peace builder early. Parties investigating in diverse participation at multiple levels now is also an investment in reaching a durable settlement tomorrow. Second, we must capitalize on existing experience. Through Norway's involvement in peace and reconciliation efforts across the world, we have seen firsthand the important contribution of women and youth in peace negotiations and the resolution of conflicts. The success of peace processes can hinge on inclusivity, We must not let this opportunity in Afghanistan slip. Third, we must rethink our approaches to better connect formal processes with grassroots initiatives. Women and youth-led organizations have presence in affected areas. They are the frontline responders that build and uphold trust in local communities by answering the immediate needs of the population in times of crisis. We must ensure that these local efforts have our support. Trust between people and communities lays the foundation for peace in the long term. And finally, we must ensure a safe and enabling environment for women and youth peacebuilders who are increasingly being harassed and threatened and even injured and killed. This is unacceptable and a problem which undermines broader Afghan peace and security effort. The women and the new generation of Afghanistan need to know that they have our support. And the negotiators and decision makers on both sides need to hear our voices of the women and youth of Afghanistan. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Jewel, for your compelling remarks. And I'm so pleased that you mentioned the importance of connecting what happens on the ground with those grassroots peace builders and what is happening in the more formal processes. So thank you for being with us and also for all that Norway is doing to ensure that this comes to pass. I want to turn now to His Excellency Ambassador James Roscoe, as with the permanent mission of the United Kingdom to the UN. Ambassador Roscoe.
Good morning, Ambassador Verveer, and thank you very much for hosting us today. It's great to be with you all as we mark the beginning of the 65th Commission on the Status of Women, and I'm really grateful to the network, the global network of women peacebuilders, and all the other organizers of today's event. I'm also grateful to Ambassadors Raz and Jewel for their opening remarks, and I'll try to say very little, but just compliment it slightly. I mean, it's safe to say we're here because we know that women and youth can make a critical contribution to local peacebuilding efforts and to peace efforts at all levels. We also know that when it comes to women's participation, the evidence is very clear. It's critical to the long-term success of peace processes that women are involved. Agreements are 2/3 less likely to fail and almost 1/3 more likely to last more than 15 years when women are involved. So the statistics back us up. So it stands to reason that there are significant advantages to be gained by ensuring the participation of women and youth at all levels, and bringing the knowledge and skills from the local peacebuilding efforts to the formal peace talks, therefore also makes sense. And that's why we're advocating for the participation of women and youth in the Afghanistan peace process, and the protection of their rights. And that's an absolute priority for the UK. And as Ambassador Raz knows, we champion this issue here in New York by co-chairing the group of friends of the women of Afghanistan, along with the Afghan mission. And one of the key objectives of that group is women's participation in the peace talks. But it's on the ground that we need to make a real difference. And I recall that when I visited Musakala in Helmand province in 2008 with Gordon Brown, we met with a group of town elders who were themselves at the time engaged in discussions with the Taliban. The front line was very close to the town. And in the course of the discussion, Gordon Brown asked where the women leaders were. We were in a room full of men, and the men all shook their heads and said, no, they spoke for the women. And I remember Gordon Brown very clearly said, look, I think you'll get better results if the women elders join and speak for themselves. But there was much shaking of heads around the room. Now, as Ambassador Raz has said, Afghanistan is changing and civil society and women's voices are being heard because they're standing up. But as we've also heard today, the violence against them as a result is growing. And that's something I think we need to think about more deeply, how we protect these women. But it's clear we can make progress. And that's why the UK is providing capacity building support to the Afghan government, the State Ministry of Peace, to women's networks, and to civil society organizations, with the aim of strengthening the capacity of civil society organizations, particularly women organizations, to engage with the peace process and provide a route to direct and meaningful negotiation. We do this because the UK believes that any political process in Afghanistan should be representative of Afghanistan's diversity at every level in its decision-making, including the meaningful inclusion of women and youth and minorities. So thank you for hosting us today. It's an incredibly important discussion, and I look forward to hearing the recommendations from our panelists. We're listening, and we want to do everything we can to help. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Roscoe, and for the UK's long-standing commitment to Afghanistan and the friendship that you have always evidenced, and for your remarks. Thank you so much. We're going to turn now to His Excellency Mohammad Koba, who is the Ambassador Perm Rep of Indonesia to the United Nations. Ambassador Koba, please.
Thank you, and have a good morning, everyone. First, I want to thank all participants of this event for joining us virtually to listen and discuss about women and youth in Afghanistan's peace process. I also thank all co-partners who have been working together to make this wonderful event happen. To begin with, Indonesia has actively participated in supporting the attainment and maintenance of peace in Afghanistan. All Afghan people are important in the peace process. We support the peace process of being Afghan-owned and Afghan-led. The participation of women and youth is key element of driving and sustaining peace on the ground. The statistics paint a brutal picture. 42% of total war victims in Afghanistan were women and children. These numbers should be reversed to zero. Indonesia, therefore, supports the greater involvement of women in driving the peace process, as well as being agents of peace in all dimensions of the Afghan society. This inspired our first female foreign minister, Ibu Retno Marsudi, to launch the Indonesia-Afghanistan Women Solidarity Network when she visited Kabul in 2020. Indonesia learned some of the aspirations of Afghan women, among others. First, there are concerns of being left out of the peace process. Local Afghan women are largely marginalized from their society role in sowing the seeds of peace. Second, now is the time for women in Afghanistan to have platforms for taking a bigger part in peace process. There is a wealth of evidence, including in my own country, Indonesia, that women's participation in economic, social, and political aspect of society leads to positive outcomes, including in peace building. In making this process tangible, we are pleased that there have been steps to generate momentum for women in Afghanistan through several platforms. In New York, women PR and DPR form a group of friends of women of Afghanistan as a vehicle to support Afghan women's role of unifying force through the lens of human rights and peace process. Ambassador Adela and Mona Jul can testify on this one. In Indonesia, our government hosted the dialogue on the role of women in building and sustaining peace in 2019 to promote the strengthening of women's capacity in Afghanistan for their national peace process. The Afghanistan-Indonesia Women's Solidarity Network, which I mentioned earlier, includes not only government entities, but also civil society and academia. This network provides a platform for sharing of experiences in Indonesia and Afghanistan. Women play a vital role in building and sustaining peace, stability, and progress. So the link between women's role in peace process will also create a momentum for youth to gain the increased ownership of peace. Obviously, the stakes are high for youth. Women and youth participation should be mutually reinforcing. To conclude, Indonesia would like to reiterate that we are ready, together with the international community, to support women and youth in Afghanistan in their effort to create peace. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Koba, and thank you for mentioning those efforts on the part of the Solidarity Network and other initiatives in Indonesia in support of inclusive Afghan peace process. We turn now to Paivi Kannisto, who is the Chief for Women, Peace and Security and Humanitarian Action Section at UN Women. Paivi, good to have you with us.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Verveer, and Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's such an honor and pleasure for UN Women to be co-hosting this event together with you. This past Friday, the UN Security Council condemned in the strongest terms the alarming number of attacks that deliberately target civilians in Afghanistan, including women in leadership positions, those who serve as civil servants, judges, journalists, teachers, medical personnel, we have heard. And the Council particularly highlighted the importance of a full, equal and meaningful role for women in peace processes. Several members of the Security Council are here, and I want to thank you for highlighting this and for making the role of women to be at the focus there. And this political emphasis of the Council couldn't have been more timely. With a proposed plan to hold peace conference in Turkey, it is critical that women's rights and their leadership remains at the center of proposed reconfiguration of a peace process. Indeed, the peace talks that opened in Doha in September last year put Afghanistan on a historic path towards much needed inclusive peace. Over the past months, we have witnessed the tireless efforts of a powerful engagement of the 4 women members of the government of Islamic Republic of Afghanistan engaged in the Doha, not just on women's rights issues, but on every crucial aspect that matters on peace and security. This will make it critical that as we move forward, we safeguard women's rights and ensure the gains are not undermined in the political settlements that are negotiated. And women at the front lines of peace need to be at the center of decisions on peace. While much attention is on formal peace talks, indeed, like we have heard from previous speakers, it is crucial that we acknowledge the real ownership and effective implementation of peace outcomes lies in Afghanistan, including amongst the leadership of women peace builders. We need to invest into strategic platforms such as this that amplify the voices of local women peace builders from different provinces of Afghanistan. And we need to, it's our moral imperative to acknowledge their creative, courageous efforts, often at the risk of threats to them and their family, and acknowledge the contribution they make to lasting and inclusive peace in Afghanistan. And as we have heard in so many, in all the previous interventions, if women and men, girls and boys in their own communities will not work for peace, but peace will not happen in real life. So we also really want to stress that women and women peace builders should not be doing this work risking their lives. So it's for all of us as an international community to find a solution to that. At the UN, the Secretary General emphasized women's participation as a conflict prevention agenda and is resolved to turn into reality. We need a radical shift, and that requires a vision and a commitment for women to be heard at all stages and layers of a peace process, in formal negotiation rooms, but also in implementation of all peace outcomes at all levels. And one day we are hoping this will be also a non-negotiable political priority for the UN, but peace processes will need to include women and men. We have the tools to make this happen. We've heard about the role of a Security Council. There is also briefings on country situations, the analysis that is included in the informal experts group on women, peace and security. We can support women's civil society organizations and women peace builders on the ground, for example, through the Women's Peace and Humanitarian Fund, Rapid Response Window on women's participation. And there is also Generation Equality, Women, Peace, Security and Humanitarian Compact that is finding innovative ways of ensuring women's participation. Afghan women rightfully deserve these opportunities now as they continue to demand to be heard, to influence and to contribute to lasting and inclusive peace in their country and beyond. And I would like to say they have the right to stay safe while doing that. UN Women will remain your committed partner. I am so much looking forward to hearing from women peace builders from Afghanistan, and that's the real priority here. So thank you so much. I'm looking forward to the discussions.
Thank you so much, Paivi, and thank you for what you do every day on these issues through UN Women. I want to thank all their excellencies for being with us to open up this discussion. They set an excellent context for the discussion, and to thank them and their leadership and the leadership of their governments in this important cause. We're going to turn now to our panel. And again, I will not introduce them through their lengthy biographies, but you will find that in your chat box. We begin with Dr. Alema, the Deputy Minister for Human Rights and Civil Society from the State Ministry for Peace in Afghanistan. Unfortunately, she is not able to be with us because she is under the weather, but she has shared her talking points with us, and I will take the liberty of sharing some of her key messages with all of you. She notes that the Afghan government firmly believes that meaningful participation of women and young people is vital to achieving peace, that the government has undertaken several initiatives to ensure that women meaningfully participate in the peace process. For example, the government's 21-member negotiation team in Doha includes 4 women. And in 2018 and 19, the government convened women's Loya Jirgas throughout the country, where women created resolutions which have informed the peace process. The government's United Voice of Women in Peace policymaking platform is a key mechanism through which women from the 13 provinces are reached, and it will be expanded to all 34 provinces soon. The government is working to protect women advocates. As you heard already, women journalists were attacked 3 weeks ago in Nangahar, and a ceasefire is urgently needed. The government negotiating team, through various consultations with civil society, has emphasized the need for a meaningful reduction in violence, the establishment of a comprehensive ceasefire, and the preservation of the achievements of the past 19 years for women's rights and human rights. Finally, Afghans will not accept an agreement that does not include the rights of women and equality between men and women. Equality and inclusion are fundamental to an Islamic way of life. So with that, we will now turn to Palwasha Hassan, who is the Executive Director of the Afghan Women's Educational Center. Palwasha, it's so good to have you with us. You have been so long active on all of these issues. let me ask, what are the barriers to meaningful participation in the ongoing peace process that local women are facing? We know how important their role is, but we too often don't know enough about what they're doing and how they can be supported. And how can these barriers be addressed to achieve a more successful inter-Afghan peace talks? So Palwasha, it will be good to hear from you. Do we have the connection to Palwasha?
Paul, you are on mute. You need to unmute yourself.
Do you hear me now? It should be fine, right?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry for this. So a very good evening to all of you and salam from Kabul. It's such an honor to be with you, Ambassador Verveer, and sharing the space with all the high-level speakers today and fellow panelists for today's event. I'm so honored to be one of the co-organizers representing AWAKE into this event. As you know, responding to your question, Ambassador Verveer, that generally we know that women, by virtue of their experiences, always bring different and diverse perspective and priorities to table and peace building arena compared to their male counterpart. And this is determined by the way women are experiencing conflict or the way their conflict is impacting their life. In my experience working with local women peace builder, the diversity is not limited to male and female gender, but cross-sectional and contextual realities that shape women's experience is also of much importance that needs to be taken into consideration along other diversities such as ethnicities, geographic and socioeconomic factors. Women peace builders and local peace builders in Afghanistan have been active in their role resolving local peace conflicts by their own virtue for centuries with very less recognition of what they are doing. And they continue to do so today through their peace building role by resolving local conflict, helping pursuing their projects, helping other women addressing social inequalities and gender-based violence in their communities. Coming back to the current peace process, and what are the main obstacles for women meaningful participation, especially at the local level? We must say that what has been generally obstacle for the peace process in Afghanistan, it's also affecting women adversely. First of all, the current peace process, the way it has been handled, we see very little local ownership of the process. Starting from 29 February of last year, peace deal between Taliban and US government with no Afghan government participation and public lack of Afghan public participation, it really undermines local ownership. And obviously, in that regard, women participation has been also not there. US and Taliban agreement give several concessions to Taliban that has further limited women's role. Today, the new proposal also where women and local women participation at the provincial and district level are considered. The only effort that has been made is only at the consulting level. What we had points from our deputy ministers regarding the jirgas, or some of the efforts which is going on in Afghanistan has been at a very minimal step of consultation. There has been less recognition of what local women can bring on the table, less investment on capacitating these potential, and use these experiences for action that define national level framework for peace in Afghanistan. And neither the proposal, which is coming from international community, especially the US peace plan, it lacks the general Afghan public ownership. And some of the elements of the proposal also further limits women demand for protection of their achievement of all these years, where the Constitution of Afghanistan is now supposed to be under review. And there could be risk of many of the gains that we had in this constitution could be at stake. In meanwhile, we often hear from critiques from the policymakers nationally and internationally regarding the elite participations where mainstream women movements are considered. However, there is always less investment in promoting local capacity for peace. These women can play essential role at the local level. The Afghan conflict, of course, has very diverse factors. And these women know how to work along these local conflict in each community where they're aware and they're working for years now, whether through traditional institutions or through the development intervention like CDC, the community development councils, through local women shuras. I think very less attention has been so far given to that because there are a great potential among these women that can be built on. Women are hugely underrepresented in the peace process as a core actors. While women are, they are part of all structures, and many of us would consider it as our achievement. However, we often see that women complain, considering their role not being meaningful or they're not being considered as a serious players. If we look to the Afghan current peace process, each time the US ambassador Khalilzad is visiting, each time he would visit the jihadi leaders who are the same repeated faces from Bonvan and before that. But where women are considered, only a token of women sometimes are included in his meeting. So that's really considering women as a necessary component for peace is not there. Leave alone what local women can bring on the table. And a second thing which is important, that we cannot limit women's role only to the formal level. Before Ambassador Mona Yol also made that point that we have to make connection between the formal and informal peace process, and that is an important component. So the role of local women peace builders is very much important, that that they could be connected to the national level peace process, but also all the elements of the peace, which is including regional and international level intervention in this regard. There are several opportunities to increase women gender equality, pre and post peace agreement, and in an all level. We need diversity of Afghan women within and outside the formal peace process to be taken as necessary and as a core element of peace building in Afghanistan. Women participation should be with and beyond the negotiation team and need to be substantiated. Now that we are hearing of the UN role in this process, I think it is time that we do not agree with only 4 women in the peace table. At least 30% of the quota should be preserved there. And I think the Afghan women continuously ask for increased number of women to be part of it. Women has always been affected by conflict. Let women now impact the peace process so that we have a stable Afghanistan, not only for men of this country, and especially not for the warlords of this country alone. Let it be for everybody from all diversity, whether it's ethnicity or geographic, linguistic, or economic class. Thank you very much, and I stop here.
Thank you so much, Palwasha, for those really important remarks, for putting an accent, for highlighting the fact that local women peace builders are not recognized the way they need to be. They play an absolutely critical role in resolving local conflicts, in dealing with gender-based violence, in acting on so many of the needs in their communities. I thought you really laid out their importance very well. And also the fact that they need to be supported because they have such a critical role to play. So I hope we all heed your remarks. I'm pleased that you mentioned the concerns about the latest peace initiative that was put out recently. And I want to call the attention of the audience to the excellent paper that many of the women's organizations of Afghanistan put out over the weekend, explaining what some of those concerns are. So thank you for your remarks, Palwasha, and hopefully when we move to the audience, questions and answers, they will have some interventions directed to you. We'll move now to Khadeja Azizi, who was the focal point for Nangahar province for the Afghan Youth Ambassadors for Peace Organizations. I hope that you can hear us okay, Khadeja. I would like to ask you how local young women in Nangahar are working towards conflict resolution. And what does sustainable peace look like for the youth in your area? So please, we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for providing me this opportunity. Thank you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. 3 months ago in Nangahar province, a female journalist was killed by unknown gunmen while she was on her way to work. 3 months later from this incident, on March 2nd, 3 other female journalists, Mursal Wahidi, Sadia Sadat, Shahnaz Raufi, were targeted by unknown gunmen while they were heading home from work. 1 day later from this incident, on March 4th, a female doctor, Sadaf, was killed in a bomb attributed to her vehicle. Nangahar youth are concerned about who will be the next target, their family members, their relatives, friends, or themselves. Hello, dear participants. I'm so privileged to be sharing this evening with all of you. Sorry for the tragedies that I shared at the beginning. This is our daily life, the life that we begin every morning with the bomb blast and target killings, the life that we begin every morning with sorrows, concerns, and griefs. But proudly, I can say we continue our efforts. We still go to school, universities, and jobs, and we still fight for our dreams. The youth in Nangahar, especially young women in remote areas of Afghanistan, still don't have access to quality education. Many don't even have schools built in the village and districts to get basic educations. In areas where schools are built, young women and people especially young women, can attend their classes due to the consent between. When it comes to the building, are mostly excluded from it due to the patriarchal culture, norms, and other social problems we face. Young women in remote areas not only have been excluded from decision-making process at national level, but also from their homes as well. Living in the patriarchal society, young women are not given the opportunity and respect, in the same respect and authority to make decisions for their lives and pursue their higher education. Yes, despite these challenges, Afghan youth are still putting their efforts to bring changes in their communities. Grassroots organizations like Afghan Youth Ambassadors for Peace organization are helping to build the capacity of young women in provinces such as Nangahar to make them agents of change and paves ways for them to meaningfully participate in decision-making process. Through Afghan Youth Ambassador for Peace organization, we received peace and security in youth, peace and security agendas at local levels by empowering young women to become leaders of change in Nangahar province. We had the opportunity to conduct community peace building dialogues with religious, tribals, and local government entities on how to remove barriers to women education in Nangahar province and how we can prevent violent extremism. For us, peace means living a life without fear, receiving quality education, participating meaningfully in the all decision-making process, including the current Afghan peace. In order to achieve this, we need to build and support grassroots level peace builders in organizations, which are working towards these goals. However, without the strong support of international communities in the Afghan governments, these efforts are not in the achievements of the past 20 years will not be sustainable. In order to build representation in the all Afghan peace process, which is currently not visible. The voice of local peace builders, and especially young women. We need organizations like the Global Network of Women Peace Builders in other UN member states to grassroots level of one female peace builders, so that the voice of young Afghan women are here and included. If we want to build a peace which is just and sustainable, we need to build it from the ground. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Khadeja. And I think your perspective is so important for this discussion, to have, the perspective of a young peace builder, in your case in Nangahar, to give us that understanding of why youth participation is so important and so critical to the future of the country. I hope that our listeners are thinking about the questions they're going to ask, and we're going to go to our final panelist, Ms. Mavic Cabrera Balleza. She is the founder and CEO of the Global Network of Women Peace Builders, and really so responsible for organizing this effort today and understanding how critical this conversation is. Mavic, you have done so much in the role of promoting and advocating for women peace builders, for effectuating women peace and security, reflecting on the history of women's peace activism across the world, because you are active across the world. How can global policymakers and the rest of the international community support the meaningful participation of local women and youth peace builders in this intra-Afghan peace process? We know, and we've heard from several of our speakers, how the work of local peace builders is often not recognized in terms of the official discussions and negotiations. And yet that work is so vital, and those experiences and issues need to be on the formal peace table. So Mavic, we're so eager to hear from you, and we thank you for all your work.
Thank you, and good morning, Ambassador Verveer, Melanne. Thank you not only for excellently moderating this event, but for your long-term leadership to galvanize international support for Afghan women's meaningful participation in the peace process. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, dear friends and colleagues. Very briefly, special thanks to the Afghan Women Education Center, Afghan Women's Youth Ambassadors for Peace, UN Women, and the permanent missions of Afghanistan, Indonesia, Norway, and the United Kingdom for co-organizing this event with the Global Network of Women Peace Builders. It's a demonstration of our strong partnership between civil society, the UN, and member states, which is a necessary ingredient in ensuring the success of the Afghan peace process. On your question, Melanne, on the role of the international community, as we all know, the success of the Afghan peace process lies on the ownership and meaningful participation of the Afghan people, especially the local populations, and especially local women and youth who have lived through this conflict. And some of them were born and raised amidst the conflict. Therefore, all support provided by global policymakers and the rest of the international community must be in support of such ownership and meaningful participation. Third parties, such as foreign governments and other important stakeholders, such as the United Nations and other multilateral institutions, as well as donor agencies and international civil society groups, must always be in close contact with local Afghan women and youth and all parties to the peace process to listen to their needs and amplify their messages. We must recognize that peace processes are always complex, and women and youth play a variety of roles in them. They are principal negotiators and mediators, and they are outside the formal peace process as civil society who are closely following the developments in the peace talks and have very practical recommendations to put forward. All of these roles are critical, but they must all be systematically linked together to benefit from the richness of these different perspectives. So one important action that the international community can take is to support such linkages by providing technical and financial as well as political support. And there are several examples that we can look at, such as the Women's Summit in Colombia during the negotiation between the government and the FARC that brought women from across the country and distilled their issues and concerns and their recommendations, and then representatives from those different women's groups and civil society organizations were identified and were supported to go to Havana to talk to the principal peace negotiators and present their issues and recommendations. So that's a model that we can look at, and there are several others. We can say they're not perfect, but there's a very good potential in linking local perspectives and bringing it to the official peace process. In addition, we also need to demand the protection of the participants in peace processes who are subjected to attacks and violence, as already emphasized by the previous speakers. At this point, I also would like to highlight the 5 global goals for the next decade presented by the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres in his report to the Security Council during the 20th anniversary of the groundbreaking Security Council Resolution 1325 last October. I believe they are some of our best guide on how the international community can effectively support the Afghan peace process. And the first one, which relates to a point that I've already mentioned and some emphasized by the other speakers, is to ensure women's equal and meaningful participation. As the Secretary General says, the international community must push for a radical shift in the meaningful participation of women in peacemaking, peacekeeping, and peace building, to ensure that women and youth, I must add, are fully involved as equal partners in peace and from the earliest stages in each and every political process. The second global goal presented by the Secretary General is to put women's human rights at the forefront. And again, this has already been mentioned by myself and the other speakers, that women are and other peace builders are subjected to attacks, and this must be a priority of the international community to call this out and do our part in ensuring their protection. The third one is reducing military spending. The Secretary General has emphasized that there's a need to reverse the upward trajectory in global military spending with a view to encouraging greater investment in infrastructure and social services, which has been highlighted very much during this pandemic. And I should also point out that the military spending, which is 1.9 trillion in 2019 alone, is the money or the funds allocated to civil society is nothing in compared to this military spending. The other global goal highlighted by the Secretary General is in relation to this actually. He calls on the international donor community to increase funding to women's rights organization 5 times to what is given to them now. And finally, gender data revolution. The Secretary General emphasized that emphasis on efficient collection of data generates the public's interest and can also result into more concrete support for the peace process in Afghanistan and all other peace processes in the world. All of us panelists in this event have emphasized the critical role of local women and youth peace builders in the success of the Afghan peace process. Equally, if not more importantly, their crucial role in the effective implementation of ensuring the successful implementation of the resulting peace agreement. Women and youth who are well-informed, who fully understand the peace process and the peace agreement would be able to reach out to the broader population, raise awareness about its importance, and generate concrete support. They would also be able to hold the parties to the agreement accountable. Local women and youth who are key actors in this are key actors in the establishment of a new and stable political order of a just, peaceful, and prosperous future for Afghanistan. So to everyone in the international community, let us do our utmost to support the peace process in Afghanistan. Let us always keep in mind that peace in Afghanistan is peace in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Mavic, and thank you for the call to action. And I think I want to underscore the importance of your comment about the need for a systematic link between local peace builders, women and youth in particular, with those who are formally engaged. We have a vast chasm between the two, and yet the one really must inform the other. And your example from Colombia is well taken. We're going to turn now to questions and answers. Turn to our listeners, our audience, our key participants, and particularly to make their comments, their interventions, or ask a question of our panelists, of Khadeja, Palwasha, or Mavic. So Malika, if I can turn to you to throw out the questions to all of us.
Thank you, Ambassador. I have received requests from 3 people who would like to make interventions, so we will go to them first, and then I will read out the questions that we have received. First, I'd like to give the floor to Zainab Azizi. You are able to speak now.
Sure. Hi, everyone, and I'm super glad to be here. It was a really good discussion so far. Hearing the concerns, the supportive thoughts of international and local professionals and experts in regards to the peace process in Afghanistan. We are all at the same time concerned. I myself, though being in the United Kingdom, I every day follow up the news in Afghanistan, and I'm worried for my family and for the future of our country. And that goes the same for every single person of my country. And of course, as a youth, it's much more important for us because we are affected by the decisions that will be taken. I have 2 main questions, right, that I want to raise. The first question is general, and I wanted to know that some of the decisions are being taken very rapidly in this whole process. And the very recent example is the U.S. Letter to the Afghan officials, and it was sort of a warning letter, but at the same time, there are a lot of values of Afghans or Afghan constitutional values that are being devalued by that letter, or at least not even taken into consideration. If from one side we see that it's sort of expediting the process because it's an international pressure from a U.S. Who is a superpower and a strategic ally to Afghanistan. But at the same time, I'm concerned that what the international community has done so far, and what's the UN in the United Kingdom and other important players or roles, that they should at the same time raise their voice and speak about this, or at least take into consideration, because everything is happening very rapidly, and March is almost, we are in half of March, and May is coming very soon, and the 2 conferences are happening one after another. But then in the main process, all these stuff that are happening, the advocacy, all the advocation that has taken place for Afghan women and youth, I believe they will not be considered, or that's my fear, that they will not be considered. And secondly, there will be more casualties in the process in case one of the parties do not achieve what their aim is to. So what will the international community really do? Because I haven't heard a lot about it. Only the local women peace builders that I'm so proud of have raised their voice about this. And my second question goes to the ambassador of India and Indonesia, I'm sorry. And my question is that, how can you receive the support of UN member states to protect young peace builders, and especially provide them opportunities to build their capacities? I believe it's very important to raise the capacities of women and youth through such programs. And I would be happy to hear about this. And thanks again for everything.
Thank you, Zainab. I will now go to Zarlas, and just a reminder to keep your interventions brief. Zarlas, you have the floor. Zarlas, you just need to unmute yourself and then you should be able to speak.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Malika. Hello, everyone. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to briefly ask my question. It's a great honor and privilege to be part of this session so far. And my name is Adela. I work in Afghanistan Independent Human Rights Commission, also a member of Afghan Youth Ambassador for Peace Organization. So my question is, what practical platforms can be used to engage local women in the current Afghan peace process? Many women don't have access to these platforms, and only those who live in the capital can have access to such platforms. So anyone can answer to this question. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And we have one last intervention from Miriam. Miriam, the floor is yours. Okay, I'm seeing a note that Miriam may have lost her connection. Would you like to try to speak? You just need to unmute yourself. Okay, perhaps in the meantime, I can share some of the questions from the chat. So in the chat, we have a question about how the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted efforts to ensure women's protection, the protection of women's rights and women peace builders and activists in the intra-Afghan peace process, and whether or not what the international community can do to ensure that a woman-led peace process is not a casualty of the pandemic. Another question we received is, what are some examples of best practices for ensuring the meaningful participation of local women and youth in the peace process, going beyond consultations? We also received a question on how civil society outside of Afghanistan can support national and local Afghan women's rights organizations. Finally, we have here what needs to be done to come to a better understanding of why the Taliban has not been open to including women and youth in decision-making, and how can we bridge this gap? And how do we hold the parties to the negotiations accountable for failing to provide and protect for Afghan women's basic human rights? Ambassador, back to you.
So we have a range of questions, and I want to throw them out to our panelists to repeat them. We were asked about the recent U.S. letter and the worries about what that represents in terms of rapid decisions that may precipitate very much unintended consequences and not really have this as an Afghan-centered process. We have questions about how to support youth peace builders in more significant ways, how to engage local women in the peace process, because so often the focus appears to be on the cities and local women don't have as much opportunity. Hopefully someone can address how that can be improved. How is COVID undermining the protection of women's rights, and probably more appropriately, what can be done during COVID to ensure that women's rights are not undermined? And then questions again about examples of best practices to involve local peace builders and particularly young peace builders, civil society, so that it can influence the ongoing process. How can it do that? And how to close the gap in terms of the Taliban's relationship to the importance of local peace builders and young people. So that's a whole lot of questions, and maybe we should start with Palwasha in the order that we went in terms of remarks. Palwasha, are you with us?
Yes, thank you very much. I think regarding the US proposal, I included my thoughts before in my speaking points earlier on. I think I totally agree with the comment which was made that ownership of the local Afghan is very much important, and peace solution cannot be made in other countries' capital. It should come from within Afghanistan, from its people, and only then it can be sustainable. And when we are talking about people, it is not people, men, it is women and men in any country, in particular in Afghanistan, where women have been the core of the burn all these years of the conflict. Regarding the pandemic, I think the question was, what were some of the efforts made by the government? Our response, or the response of Afghan government, was very poor. Somehow, in the beginning of the pandemic, we almost, maybe other countries had their peak after a year or months later, but Afghan had it in the beginning because we were so unprepared for this. And women was hugely affected by this because we have displaced population, especially they were affected. The first returnees from Iran and Pakistan in that time were some of the high victim of the pandemic. The peace builders, the research we have done was that, like, they didn't have access to the health facilities. Their husband lost jobs. They were not connected with the other women. So in the beginning, that lockdown affected them, but which also meant increase in the violence, domestic violence as well. In a number of measures to protect women peace builders and their work, there is not recognizable information that I can share with you, or statistics or programs that really help people. There were few programs by the government which help the poor families, which still continues, like food items distribution. But the most important was people-to-people help in that time, where women groups, diasporas from abroad, they send money, they send support, and we in Afghanistan try to buy food packages and distribute it among poor. I think that is the best we could have done in that time, or raise information among the communities to increase protection against the pandemic. How to increase the participation of local peace builders and youth in the peace process. I think the most important thing is, like, to consider them as core element or actors. If we just have the same attitude of tokenism, that is not sufficient. Second, it's important to see them like they really can play an important role. And after that recognition, one have to capacitate the capacity of those local potential which exists there, and that can be multiplied, amplified at the national and provincial level. And the third thing is, like, we should not see only a peace in the capitals of foreign countries. We have to see peace in a different level of our own country, at the local level, at the district level, and then we can recognize and give everybody participation. We cannot bring 200 members of the negotiation team to represent everybody. We can have these representatives in different levels. They could be in the peace monitoring, they could be the ceasefire involved, they could be involved in the future post-peace plan. And for that, we also recognize that the actual peace should be made at the local level, because once, if we agree with any agreement between Taliban and the Afghan Islamic Republic, then we will have to deal with reintegration of the those fighters back in the community. A lot has been made. We have to go through that process of community healing to accept those people. And then, you know, like, you have so many things to be done. And I think there is parts for everybody to be concentrated on. And it is time that if international donors want to invest, they should not wait for this whole thing to be taken step by step. We have to start parallel process to prepare communities to embrace the peace agreement after it is agreed to a certain level, that how it will be implemented at the local level. And only then we can increase the role of young people, the role of those local women peace builders. All of them play very much important role. Maybe we cannot always bring experts from cities to those places. There are already experts there, and we have to build on that. The last one was regarding the Taliban, how to decrease the gap. I think Taliban also have to embrace those realities of Afghanistan that change within country. After 20 years, they have to deal with youth who are so much empowered, and they have very different perspective for the future of their countries. They should also believe that women of Afghanistan has much to contribute to the rebuilding of the country. And only then, after we respect and recognize each other, the way women have accepted Taliban as a reality, the same way the Taliban should open their minds about the reality of the women of Afghanistan, the youth of Afghanistan, and then we can work together to decrease these gaps. I stop here, and I'm sure there are other questions that others can discuss.
Yeah, thank you so much, Palwasha, and also for reiterating the point about reintegration. The women at the peace at the local level are going to be so important if that is going to happen in the future once there is an agreement. So yet another reason to invest in local peace builders and youth peace builders. Ambassador Koba, I understand you want to make a comment, please.
Yes, thank you, Ambassador. I would like to comment about there was a question about the youth peace builders in Afghan process. So to me, peace process has to be inclusive. And inclusion increases the possibility of sustaining peace. So it is very important to include everyone in the process, including the youth. When I said, as I mentioned earlier in my intervention, that we support the Afghan-owned and Afghan-led peace process. Maybe I should say also it should be youth-owned and youth-led process. Because also youth and women, they are closely related. And then if you, I didn't mention it earlier, but we have, this year is the International Year of Creative Economy. So youth and creativity, you know, they have a lot of creativity. So usually this economy also very resilient. So if somehow the youth can, you know, explore their creativity and involve in creative economy activities, and they don't, you know, they don't want to go to war or to conflict. They want to make money. So if you give them a framework to explore their creativity, then maybe they can have a meaningful contribution to the peace process. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Khadeja, did you want to say anything before I turn to Mavic? Maybe Khadeja is not able to connect. Mavic, let's turn to you for the last words.
Thank you so much, Melanne. I would like to respond to the question about other examples of processes that involve local women and youth. I already spoke about the Colombian experience. I want to share the South Sudan experience, which is to me the realization of, you know, how when women peace activists emphasize that we don't only need to bring women at the peace negotiation table, but we need to reshape the table. I think the South Sudan peace process between the government and the South Sudanese liberation movement in opposition was an effort to do that, that the warring, the table was not only between the warring parties, but it also involved representatives from civil society, especially women's rights organizations, representatives from faith-based organizations and former political detainees. And they were there to present the issues and concerns by their constituencies. But I must also emphasize that this is not a perfect process, but it was a good start. There's a lot of need to do broad awareness raising on the peace agreement, which I think should be the focus of South Sudan negotiators at this point, with support from the international community and regional organizations. Another example is from the Philippines, where I come from. Following the signing of the peace agreement between the government and the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, which took more than a decade, the next phase was turning the peace agreement into a law. But that was done not only in the parliament, but also through a plebiscite. So the young women leaders for peace that we've been working with in different areas in Mindanao campaigned for the success or for the ratification of the peace agreement in different parts of Mindanao, particularly those areas that have been deeply affected by conflict, and they were very successful. In all of the areas that the young women leaders for peace campaigned, the peace agreement was ratified. So what is the message here from the young women peace builders in the Philippines? Is that the message is that don't wait to get invited. You assert your right and you present the solutions that you offer. And many we face a lot of challenges that in doing this. One of them is lack of financial support. So my call to the international community, especially the donors, is to look at the peace process as not just one process that takes, phases, but this is a continuing work. This is work for the long term. And this is when we say peace is not a project. It's our lifestyle. It's our global culture. And we really call on the donor community support to make this happen. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Mavic. That's going to have to be the last formal words of this extremely important session that has been called together today. It may be the end of a virtual event, but the work continues, and it's hard work ahead of us that must not only be continued, but must be accelerated. We have to lend our voices and our leadership and our commitment to this important issue at this very critical time in the Afghan peace process. We've heard a great deal about the important role, a role we hear about not often enough, the role of women peace builders at the local level and youth peace builders. Their experience, their participation is absolutely critical to the outcome. So we need to support them. and do everything that we can to ensure that their voices will be heard and that their participation will be able to make a difference. So I want to thank everyone who brought us together for this event, for the sponsors, for the interventions of their excellencies in setting the context today, and for our exceptional panelists who grappled with these issues. So we hope Dr. Alema is feeling better. We thank her for sending us her remarks to Palwasha, to Khadeja, and to Mavic. Thank each and